While America's major metropolitan areas continue to attract millions of new residents, a different story is unfolding in cities across the nation. From the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt, from former industrial powerhouses to once thriving port cities, dozens of American cities are facing an existential crisis that could see them cease to function as viable urban centers by 20. These aren't small towns or rural communities. These are established cities with populations in the tens of thousands, complete with municipal governments, school systems, and urban infrastructure. Yet they're experiencing population decline so severe, economic collapse so complete, and infrastructure failure so widespread that their survival as functioning cities is in serious doubt. The crisis facing America's dying cities is multifaceted and complex. Industrial automation and global competition have eliminated the manufacturing jobs that once sustained entire urban economies. Climate change is making some cities literally uninhabitable, while others face repeated natural disasters that drive away residents and businesses. Demographic shifts see young professionals and families fleeing for opportunities in thriving metropolitan areas, leaving behind aging populations unable to support urban-scale services and infrastructure. Financial insolvency lurks beneath the surface of many struggling cities. As tax bases shrink and costs remain fixed, municipal governments face impossible choices between maintaining basic services and declaring bankruptcy. Some cities have already crossed this line, while others teeter on the edge of fiscal collapse that would make governance effectively impossible. The human cost of urban decline extends far beyond economics. Entire neighborhoods sit abandoned, creating urban prairies where houses once stood. Schools close as enrollment plummets, leaving children with limited educational opportunity. Hospitals shut down, forcing residents to travel hours for medical care. Public safety deteriorates as police and fire departments operate with skeleton crews, creating dangerous conditions that accelerate the exodus of remaining residents. Yet the story isn't uniformly bleak. Among the cities facing extinction, a few remarkable communities have found ways to reinvent themselves, embracing change and creating new economic foundations that position them not just to survive, but to thrive in the modern economy. Their success stories offer valuable lessons about adaptation, innovation, and the power of visionary leadership in urban renewal. Detroit, Michigan, Motor City's final miles, once the proud symbol of American industrial might, Detroit has become the poster child for urban decline in the 21st century. From a peak population of 1.8 million in 1950, Detroit has shrunk to fewer than 630,000 residents today, making it one of the fastest shrinking major cities in American history. The roots of Detroit's decline trace back to the 1960s, when racial tensions, suburban flight, and the beginning of automotive industry decline created a perfect storm of urban crisis. The 1967 riots accelerated white and middle-class flight to the suburbs, while the big three automakers began moving operations to low-cost locations in the South and overseas. Recent development efforts have focused on a small area of downtown and midtown Detroit, creating pockets of renewal that have attracted media attention and some new investment. However, these improvements affect less than 7% of the city's geographic area, and have not reversed the broader patterns of decline affecting the vast majority of Detroit's neighborhoods. Climate change poses additional challenges for Detroit's future. The Great Lakes region is experiencing more frequent extreme weather events, including severe storms and flooding that strain the city's aging infrastructure. While climate change may make Detroit more attractive relative to cities facing more severe environmental challenges, the city lacks the resources to capitalize on this potential advantage. Flint, Michigan. Water crisis and urban collapse. Flint, Michigan represents one of America's most shocking examples of urban institutional failure, where government negligence created a public health catastrophe that accelerated the collapse of an already struggling post-industrial city. The water crisis that began in 2014 has become synonymous with environmental injustice and governmental incompetence, driving away residents and investment at an accelerated pace. Once a thriving industrial city of nearly 200,000 residents built around General Motors manufacturing, Flint has experienced devastating population decline as the automotive industry downsized and relocated. The city's population has fallen to fewer than 95,000 residents, representing a loss of more than half its peak population, with the decline accelerating after the water crisis began. Infrastructure problems extend far beyond the water system. Flint's aging infrastructure reflects decades of deferred maintenance and insufficient investment. Roads are in poor condition, public buildings are deteriorating, and the city lacks resources to maintain basic services at acceptable levels. The cost of infrastructure replacement exceeds the city's financial capacity by enormous margins. Educational opportunities in Flint have deteriorated along with other city services. School enrollment has plummeted as families leave the city, forcing school closures and consolidation. The remaining schools struggle with limited resources and the challenging demographics of students affected by lead exposure, creating educational conditions that drive more families to leave. The demographic composition of Flint's remaining population makes recovery increasingly unlikely. The city has lost most of its middle-class and working-age population, leaving behind residents who lack the resources to relocate. The population is disproportionately poor, elderly, and African American, reflecting patterns of environmental injustice that made the water crisis possible. National attention and federal assistance have provided some resources for addressing the water crisis, but these efforts cannot reverse the broader urban decline that the crisis accelerated. While water quality has improved, the reputation damage and population loss create lasting challenges that extend far beyond infrastructure repair. Camden, New Jersey, industrial ruins across from Philadelphia. Separated from Philadelphia by only the Delaware River, Camden, New Jersey represents one of America's starkest examples of urban collapse occurring in the shadow of a thriving major city. Despite its prime location and transportation connections, Camden has experienced such complete economic and social breakdown that it functions more as a cautionary tale than a viable city. Camden's decline began in the 1950s as manufacturing jobs disappeared and middle-class residents fled to the suburbs. The city lost its major employers, including Campbell Soup Company headquarters and RCA manufacturing facilities, eliminating tens of thousands of jobs and devastating the local economy. By 2020, Camden's population had fallen to just over 73,000 residents, down from a peak of nearly 125,000 in 1950. The economic devastation in Camden is nearly complete. The city has one of the highest poverty rates in the nation, with over 40% of residents living below the poverty line. Unemployment rates consistently exceed national averages by wide margins, and most available jobs pay wages insufficient to support families. The lack of economic opportunity drives away working-age residents and prevents the investment needed for renewal. Despite its proximity to Philadelphia and excellent transportation connections, Camden has been unable to capitalize on potential advantages. The contrast between Camden's decay and Philadelphia's relative prosperity, visible across the Delaware River, highlights how urban decline can persist even in economically advantageous locations, when fundamental problems remain unaddressed. Recent efforts to attract development through tax incentives and special economic zones have had limited impact on Camden's broader challenges. While some new construction has occurred in targeted areas, these improvements have not reversed the patterns of decline affecting most of the city or significantly improved conditions for existing residents. Youngstown, Ohio. Steel City's structural collapse. Once the heart of America's steel production, Youngstown, Ohio, has experienced one of the most dramatic urban collapses in the nation's history. From a peak population of 170,000 in 1960, the city has shrunk to fewer than 60,000 residents today, losing nearly two-thirds of its population as the steel industry disappeared and took the city's economic foundation with it. The collapse began on September 1977, known locally as Black Monday, when Youngstown Steel and Tube Company announced the closure of its massive Briar Hill Works, eliminating 5,000 jobs in a single day. This event triggered a domino effect that saw other steel-related industries close or relocate, creating massive unemployment and beginning a population exodus that continues today. The economic devastation in Youngstown is comprehensive and seemingly irreversible. The city's economy was so dependent on steel production that when the industry collapsed, no alternative economic base existed to support the urban population. Attempts to diversify the economy have had minimal success, as the city lacks the amenities, infrastructure, and skilled workforce needed to attract modern industries. Municipal services in Youngstown have been cut repeatedly due to budget constraints. The city operates with a fraction of its former workforce, while trying to maintain services across a large geographic area. Basic services like snow removal, park maintenance, and code enforcement operate with minimal resources and effectiveness. The housing market in Youngstown has collapsed completely in many neighborhoods, with houses selling for under $10,000 or being abandoned entirely. Property values are so low that homeowners cannot recover their investment, trapping residents in declining neighborhoods and preventing the mobility needed for economic recovery. Gary, Indiana. Steel town's toxic legacy. Located on the southern shore of Lake Michigan, Gary, Indiana was once a model company town built by U.S. steel houseworkers for its massive steel production complex. Today, Gary stands as one of America's most dramatic examples of post-industrial urban collapse, with a population that has fallen from 78,000 in 1960 to fewer than 69,000 today. Gary's decline began in the 1960s as steel production started moving to more modern facilities in other locations. The city's economy was almost entirely dependent on U.S. steel, making it extremely vulnerable when the company began downsizing operations. Racial tensions and white flight accelerated the city's problems, as middle-class residents moved to suburban communities, taking their tax dollars and investment with them. Healthcare access in Gary has deteriorated as medical facilities close or reduce service. The city has lost hospitals and clinics, creating healthcare deserts that force residents to travel to other communities for medical care. Limited healthcare access is particularly problematic given the environmental health challenges facing residents. Municipal services in Gary have been reduced repeatedly due to budget constraints. The city operates with minimal staff while trying to provide services across a large geographic area. Infrastructure maintenance, code enforcement, and basic municipal services operate with insufficient resources and effectiveness. The demographic composition of Gary's remaining population makes recovery extremely challenging. The city has lost most of its middle-class and working-age population, leaving behind residents who lack resources for investment or mobility. The population is disproportionately poor and elderly, limiting the city's capacity for renewal or adaptation. Stockton, California. Central Valley's financial meltdown. Located in California's Central Valley, Stockton became the largest American city to declare bankruptcy at the time of its 2012 filing, highlighting how even cities in prosperous states can face complete financial collapse. Despite California's overall economic growth, Stockton's combination of housing market collapse, pension obligations, and economic mismanagement created a perfect storm of municipal insolvency. Stockton's problems began during the housing boom of the 2000s, when the city borrowed heavily against future property tax revenues to fund generous employee compensation packages and ambitious development projects. When the housing market collapsed in 2008, property values plummeted by over 60%, devastating the city's primary revenue source, while leaving enormous debt obligations intact. Demographics in Stockton show patterns typical of distressed urban areas. The city has lost middle-class residents, while gaining lower-income populations, reducing the tax base and increasing demand for social services. The remaining population has limited resources to invest in community improvement or economic development. Municipal services in Stockton operate with severely constrained budgets. The city has cut staff positions, reduced service hours, and deferred maintenance on public facilities. Parks are poorly maintained, libraries have limited hours, and basic city services operate with minimal effectiveness due to budget constraints. Birmingham, Alabama. Steel City of the South's decline. Once known as the Pittsburgh of the South, Birmingham, Alabama built its identity around steel production and heavy industry. However, deindustrialization, racial tensions, and economic stagnation have left the city struggling with population loss, fiscal challenges, and an inability to adapt to the modern economy. Birmingham's population peaked at over 340,000 in 1960 but has declined to fewer than 200,000 residents today. The city has lost nearly half its population as steel plants closed, middle-class residents moved to suburbs, and economic opportunities disappeared. This population loss has created a fiscal crisis as the city tries to maintain services across a large area with a diminished tax base. Infrastructure in Birmingham shows the effects of decades of deferred maintenance and insufficient investment. Roads are in poor condition, public buildings are deteriorating, and water systems require expensive upgrades. The cost of infrastructure improvements exceeds the city's financial capacity, creating a cycle of decline. The demographic composition of Birmingham's remaining population presents challenges for renewal. The city has lost much of its middle-class and working-age population, leaving behind residents who often lack resources for investment or mobility. High poverty rates limit the tax base and increase demand for social services. Municipal services in Birmingham operate with constrained budgets that limit effectiveness. The city has reduced staff, cut programs, and deferred maintenance on public facilities. Basic services like park maintenance, code enforcement, and infrastructure repair operate with insufficient resources. Dayton, Ohio. Aviation pioneers crash landing. Home to the Wright brothers and a historic center of aviation innovation, Ohio has experienced devastating population decline and economic collapse that has transformed it from a thriving industrial city into a struggling post-industrial community. The city's population has fallen from over 200. Dayton's decline began as major employers in the automotive and aerospace industries closed or relocated operations. General Motors, NCR Corporation, and other major manufacturers eliminated thousands of jobs, devastating the local economy and triggering population exodus. The city lost its competitive advantages as industries globalized and sought lower-cost production locations. The economic devastation in Dayton is comprehensive, with unemployment rates consistently exceeding state and national averages. The city struggles to attract new industries due to its reputation for decline, lack of amenities, and limited skilled workforce. Most available employment offers wages insufficient to support middle-class lifestyles, encouraging continued out-migration. Municipal services in Dayton operate with severely constrained budgets. The city has eliminated positions, reduced service levels, and deferred maintenance on public infrastructure. Parks are poorly maintained, library hours have been cut, and basic city services operate with minimal effectiveness. The demographic profile of Dayton's remaining residents makes recovery extremely challenging. The city has lost most of its middle class and young adults, leaving behind population that is disproportionately poor and elderly. This demographic composition limits the city's capacity for renewal and economic development. Hartford, Connecticut. Insurance capital's policy lapse. Once known as the insurance capital of the world, Hartford, Connecticut represents how even cities with historical advantages and established industries can face complete economic and fiscal collapse. Despite being the state capital and home to major corporations, Hartford declared bankruptcy in 2018 after years of financial mismanagement and economic decline. Hartford's problems stem from a combination of suburban flight, corporate relocations, and fiscal mismanagement that left the city unable to maintain services or attract investment. Major insurance companies that gave the city its identity have relocated headquarters to suburban locations or other states, eliminating jobs and tax revenue from the urban core. Housing conditions in Hartford reflect broader urban distress. Many neighborhoods experience high rates of vacant and abandoned properties that create safety hazards and reduce property values. The combination of limited economic opportunities and safety concerns keeps housing demand low and property values depressed. Infrastructure in Hartford shows the effects of years of deferred maintenance and insufficient investment. Roads are in poor condition, public buildings are deteriorating, and water systems require expensive upgrades that the city cannot afford. Poor infrastructure creates additional barriers to economic development and quality of life. Municipal services in Hartford have been severely reduced due to budget constraints. The city operates with minimal staff while trying to provide services to residents across a large area. Basic services like park maintenance, snow removal, and code enforcement operate with insufficient resources and limited effectiveness. Rochester, New York. Kodak moments end. Rochester, New York was once synonymous with innovation and prosperity as the headquarters of Eastman Kodak Company and home to other major technology companies. However, the collapse of the film industry and failure to adapt to digital technology have left Rochester struggling with population decline and economic transformation that threatens its viability as a major urban center. Rochester's population has declined from over 330,000 in 1950 to fewer than 21,000 today, representing a loss of more than one-third of its peak population. The decline accelerated after 2000 as Kodak's bankruptcy and massive layoffs eliminated tens of thousands of jobs, triggering an exodus of working-age residents and families. Housing market conditions in Rochester reflect broader economic distress. Property values have declined significantly, particularly in neighborhoods most affected by population loss. Many houses sit vacant or abandoned, creating safety hazards and neighborhood deterioration that accelerates further population decline. Healthcare access in Rochester remains relatively strong due to the presence of major medical institutions. But these healthcare systems serve increasingly large geographic areas as rural hospitals close. The economic challenges facing the city threaten the sustainability of some healthcare services and facilities. Municipal services in Rochester operate with constrained budgets that limit their effectiveness. The city has reduced staff positions, cut programs, and deferred maintenance on public facilities and infrastructure. Basic services like road maintenance, Park upkeep and code enforcement operate with insufficient resources to serve the city's needs adequately. Louis, Missouri, gateway to decline. Once the proud gateway to the West and America's fourth largest city, St. Louis has experienced one of the most dramatic population declines of any major American city. From a peak of 56,000 residents, Louis has shrunk to fewer than 300,000 today, losing nearly two-thirds of its population and creating vast areas of urban abandonment. The roots of St. Louis's decline trace back to the 1950s, when the city's boundaries were frozen by Missouri law, preventing annexation of growing suburban area. This unique situation allowed suburban communities to capture growth while the urban core stagnated, creating a pattern of decline that has persisted for decades. Economic transformation devastated St. Louis as manufacturing jobs disappeared and corporate headquarters relocated. Major employers like McDonnell Douglas, Anheuser-Busch, and numerous manufacturing companies either closed, moved, or were acquired by out-of-state corporations. The loss of these anchor employers eliminated tens of thousands of jobs and weakened the city's economic foundation. The demographic composition of St. Louis's remaining population presents enormous challenges for recovery. The city has lost most of its middle-class and working-age population, leaving behind residents who are disproportionately poor and African American. This demographic concentration reflects decades of residential segregation and discriminatory policies. Municipal services in St. Louis operate with severely constrained resources. The city has eliminated hundreds of positions, closed facilities, and reduced service levels across all departments. Basic services like street maintenance, park upkeep, and code enforcement operate with minimal effectiveness due to budget limitations and staffing shortages. Housing abandonment is visible throughout St. Louis, with entire city blocks featuring more vacant lots than occupied structure. The city's demolition programs cannot keep pace with ongoing abandonment, creating dangerous conditions and neighborhood deterioration that accelerates population loss. Infrastructure decay in St. Louis reflects decades of deferred maintenance and insufficient investment. The city's aging water system, deteriorating roads, and crumbling public buildings require hundreds of millions of dollars in repairs that exceed the city's financial capacity. Buffalo, New York, Rust Belt's northern frontier. Located on the shores of Lake Erie, Buffalo, New York once thrived as a major industrial city and transportation hub connecting the Great Lakes to the Atlantic seaboard. However, the opening of the Lawrence Seaway, decline of manufacturing, and harsh climate have combined to create a perfect storm of urban decline. Buffalo's population has fallen from over 80,000 in 1950 to fewer than 255,000 today, representing a loss of more than half its peak population. The decline began in the 1960s as the steel industry collapsed and manufacturing jobs disappeared, accelerating as young people fled the harsh climate for opportunities in warmer, more economically dynamic regions. The economic foundation of Buffalo was built on heavy industry, steel production, and Great Lakes shipping. When these industries declined due to foreign competition and technological change, the city lacked alternative economic sectors to absorb displaced workers. Attempts at economic diversification have had limited success in replacing the scale of employment that manufacturing once provided. Municipal services in Buffalo operate with budget constraints that limit effectiveness. The city has reduced staff, cut programs, and deferred maintenance on infrastructure and public facilities. Snow removal, a critical service in Buffalo's climate, consumes a disproportionate share of the city budget. Housing market conditions in Buffalo reflect broader economic challenge. Property values remain low by national standards, and many neighborhoods experience high vacancy rates. Low property values trap residents in declining areas and prevent the accumulation of wealth needed for economic mobility. Newark, New Jersey. Urban crisis in the shadow of Manhattan. Despite its proximity to New York City and excellent transportation connections, Newark, New Jersey has struggled with urban decline, fiscal crisis, and social problems that have persisted for decades. The city's location should provide economic advantages, but crime, poverty, and governance challenges have prevented Newark from capitalizing on its geographic position. Newark experienced devastating riots in 1967 that accelerated white flight and business departures, beginning a cycle of decline that has proven difficult to reverse. The city's population fell from over 440,000 in 1950 to fewer than 85,000 today, with middle-class residents continuing to leave for suburban communities. Housing conditions in Newark show the effects of urban decline. Many neighborhoods have high rates of vacant and abandoned properties that create safety hazards and reduce property values. Limited economic opportunities keep housing demand low and property values depressed throughout much of the city. Healthcare access in Newark faces challenges despite the presence of some major medical institutions. Many residents rely on emergency rooms for primary care, and specialized services may require travel to other communities. Public health indicators in Newark rank among the worst in New Jersey. Infrastructure in Newark shows the effects of decades of insufficient investment and deferred maintenance. The city's aging water system, deteriorating roads, and crumbling public buildings require extensive repairs that exceed available resources. Trenton, New Jersey, capital city's constitutional thesis. As New Jersey's state capital, Trenton should enjoy economic advantages from government employment and related activity. However, the city has experienced severe urban decline, with population loss, high crime rates, and fiscal challenges that have persisted despite its political importance. Trenton's population has declined from over 130,000 in 1950 to fewer than 84,000 today, representing a loss of more than one-third of its peak population. The decline has accelerated in recent decades as middle-class residents and families have moved to suburban communities, leaving behind a population that is disproportionately poor. Economic opportunities in Trenton are limited despite its role as state capital. While government provides some employment stability, private sector job creation has been minimal. The city struggles to attract businesses due to high crime rates, poor schools, and limited amenities that would appeal to employers or employees. Housing conditions in Trenton show extensive urban distress. Many neighborhoods have high rates of vacant and abandoned properties that create safety hazards and reduce property values throughout the city. Limited economic opportunities and safety concerns keep housing demand low. The demographic composition of Trenton's remaining population presents challenges for renewal. The city has lost much of its middle-class and working-age population, leaving behind residents who lack resources for investment or economic mobility. High poverty rates limit the tax base and increase demands on city services. Healthcare access in Trenton is limited, with hospital closures reducing available services. Many residents travel to other communities for medical care, and public health indicators reflect the broader social and economic challenges facing the city. Camden, Arkansas. Small city, big problems. Camden, Arkansas represents the challenges facing small cities in economically distressed regions. With a population of fewer than 11,000 residents, Camden has experienced steady decline as traditional industries disappeared, and young people left for opportunities elsewhere. The economic foundation of Camden was built on timber, oil refining, and defense manufacturing. When these industries declined or relocated, the city lost its primary sources of employment and economic activity. Attempts to attract new industries have had limited success due to the city's remote location and limited infrastructure. The economic opportunities available in Camden are primarily low-wage service jobs that cannot support middle-class lifestyles. The lack of career advancement opportunities encourages working-age residents to seek employment elsewhere, contributing to ongoing population decline. Municipal services in Camden operate with limited resources due to the small tax base and declining population. The city struggles to maintain infrastructure, provide adequate public safety, and deliver services that residents expect from municipal government. Housing conditions in Camden reflect broader economic challenges. Property values are low, and many neighborhoods have vacant and abandoned properties that create safety hazards and reduce property values further. Limited economic opportunities keep housing demand minimal. Healthcare access in Camden is limited, with residents often traveling to larger cities for specialized medical care. The closing of rural hospitals in the region has created healthcare deserts that particularly affect elderly residents. Selma, Alabama. Civil rights legacy. Economic realities. Selma, Alabama holds an important place in American civil rights history, but this historical significance has not translated into economic prosperity or population growth. The city has experienced steady decline as economic opportunities disappeared, and young people left for better prospects elsewhere. Selma's population has fallen from over 28,000 in 1980 to fewer than 18,000 today, representing a loss of more than one-third of its population. The decline has accelerated in recent years as manufacturing jobs disappeared, and no alternative economic base developed to replace them. The economic foundation of Selma was built on agriculture and manufacturing, both of which have declined significantly. The closure of manufacturing plants eliminated hundreds of jobs, while agricultural mechanization reduced employment in farming. The city has struggled to attract new industries that could provide sustainable employment. Municipal services in Selma operate with severe budget constraints that limit their effectiveness. The city has reduced staff, cut programs, and deferred maintenance on infrastructure and public facilities. Basic services operate with minimal resources and limited capacity. Housing conditions in Selma show extensive deterioration, with many neighborhoods having high rates of vacant and abandoned properties. Property values are extremely low, and limited economic opportunities keep housing demand minimal throughout much of the city. Jackson, Mississippi, capital in crisis. As Mississippi's largest city and state capital, Jackson should theoretically enjoy advantages from government employment and political importance. However, the city faces a perfect storm of challenges, including massive population loss, infrastructure collapse, and fiscal crisis that threaten its viability as a functioning urban center. Jackson's population has plummeted from over 200,000 in 1980 to fewer than 155,000 today, with the decline accelerating in recent years. The city has lost nearly 25% of its population, with middle-class families and young professionals leaving for suburban communities or other states with better economic opportunities. The water crisis in Jackson has become a symbol of municipal failure. The city's aging water treatment facilities have repeatedly failed, leaving residents without safe drinking water for extended periods. Boil water notices have become routine, and the system requires hundreds of millions of dollars in repairs that the city cannot afford. Infrastructure collapse extends beyond water systems to include deteriorating roads, failing sewage systems, and crumbling public buildings. The city estimates it needs over $2 billion for infrastructure repairs, an impossible sum for a municipality with declining revenues and limited bonding capacity. Economic opportunities in Jackson are increasingly limited despite its role as state capital. Major employers have relocated to suburban areas or other states, eliminating jobs and tax revenue. The city struggles to attract new businesses due to crime concerns, poor infrastructure, and negative perceptions about governance and service delivery. Municipal services in Jackson have deteriorated significantly due to budget constraints and infrastructure failures. Basic services like garbage collection operate inconsistently, street maintenance is minimal, and public facilities are poorly maintained. The water system failures highlight broader municipal capacity problems. Benton Harbor, Michigan. Fruit Belt's rotten core. Located along Lake Michigan's shoreline, Benton Harbor was once a thriving industrial city built around fruit processing and manufacturing. Today, it represents one of Michigan's most distressed urban communities, with extreme poverty, population decline, and municipal dysfunction that threaten its survival. Benton Harbor's population has fallen from over 16,000 in 1980 to fewer than 9,000 today, representing a loss of nearly half its residents. The decline accelerated as manufacturing jobs disappeared, and residents fled high crime rates and limited economic opportunity. Municipal services in Benton Harbor have been severely compromised due to budget constraints and management problems. The city has operated under emergency management at various times, with state-appointed officials making decisions due to fiscal crisis and gardens failure. Housing conditions in Benton Harbor show extensive urban decay. Many neighborhoods have high rates of vacant and abandoned properties that create safety hazards and reduce property values throughout the city. Property values are among the lowest in Michigan, trapping residents in declining areas. Healthcare access in Benton Harbor is limited, with hospital closures reducing available services. Many residents lack health insurance and rely on emergency rooms for primary care. Public health indicators reflect the broader social and economic challenges facing residents. The demographic composition of Benton Harbor's remaining population makes recovery extremely challenging. The city has lost most of its middle-class and working-age population, leaving behind residents who lack resources for investment or mobility. High poverty rates limit the tax base while increasing demands on social services. East St. Louis, Illinois. Gateway to disaster. Located across the Mississippi River from St. Louis, Missouri, East St. Louis, Illinois, represents one of America's most complete examples of urban collapse. Once an important industrial center, the city has experienced catastrophic population decline, economic devastation, and municipal failure that has left it barely functioning as an urban entity. East St. Louis reached its peak population of over 82,000 in 1950, but has declined to fewer than 18,000 residents today, losing nearly 80% of its population. This represents one of the most dramatic urban population collapses in American history, leaving vast areas of the city essentially abandoned. The economic foundation of East St. Louis was built on heavy industry, including steel production, meatpacking, and chemical manufacturing. When these industries closed or relocated, the city lost virtually its entire economic base with no alternative sectors to provide employment for displaced workers. Crime rates in East St. Louis have been among the highest in the nation for decades. The city consistently ranks as one of America's most dangerous places, with murder rates that exceed war zones. Extreme violence has driven away residents and businesses while making economic development virtually impossible. Healthcare access is virtually non-existent in East St. Louis. The city has no hospital and limited medical services, forcing residents to travel to other communities for healthcare. Emergency medical services operate with minimal resources and face dangerous conditions. The demographic composition of East St. Louis reflects extreme urban distress. The remaining population is overwhelmingly poor and African American, with limited resources or opportunities for economic mobility. The city has essentially become a reservation for the most disadvantaged residents who cannot afford to leave. Chester, Pennsylvania, River City's last rapids. Located on the Delaware River south of Philadelphia, Chester, Pennsylvania, was once a thriving industrial city built around shipbuilding and manufacturing. Today, it struggles with severe urban decline, high crime rates, and fiscal crisis that threaten its survival as a functioning municipality. Chester's population has declined from over 66,000 in 1950 to fewer than 33,000 today, representing a loss of more than half its residents. The decline accelerated as shipbuilding ended and manufacturing jobs disappeared, eliminating the economic foundation that supported the city for generations. Economic opportunities in Chester are extremely limited despite its location near Philadelphia. The city has been unable to capitalize on its proximity to larger metropolitan areas due to crime, poor infrastructure, and negative reputation that discourages business investment. Healthcare access in Chester is limited, with hospital closures reducing available service. Many residents lack adequate access to healthcare and rely on emergency rooms for primary care. Public health indicators reflect the broader challenges facing the community. The demographic composition of Chester reflects patterns of extreme urban distress. The city has a high poverty rate and limited middle-class population, reducing the tax base while increasing demands for social services. Most residents lack resources for investment or economic mobility. Compton, California, straight outta options, once synonymous with gang violence and urban decay. Compton, California, has made some improvements in recent years but continues to face fundamental challenges that threaten its long-term viability. Despite its location in economically dynamic Southern California, the city struggles with poverty, crime, and limited economic opportunity. Compton's population has remained relatively stable at around 97,000 residents, but the city faces persistent challenges related to poverty, crime, and limited economic development. The city's reputation for violence and gang activity continues to hinder efforts to attract businesses and investment. Economic opportunities in Compton are limited despite its location near Los Angeles. The city has struggled to attract major employers due to crime concerns, poor infrastructure, and competition from other communities with better business environments. Most available employment consists of low-wage service jobs. Municipal services in Compton operate with budget constraints that affect their effectiveness. While basic services function, the city struggles to provide the level of services that residents expect and that would be necessary to attract new residents and businesses. Housing conditions in Compton reflect broader urban challenges. While not as severely distressed as some other cities, many neighborhoods have issues with overcrowding, poor maintenance, and limited homeownership opportunities. Property values remain low relative to surrounding areas. Healthcare access in Compton faces challenges typical of low-income communities. Many residents lack adequate health insurance and rely on emergency rooms for primary care. Public health indicators reflect the broader socioeconomic challenges facing residents. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Steel City's Silicon Renaissance. Pittsburgh represents one of America's most successful urban transformations. Once synonymous with steel production and heavy industry, the city experienced devastating decline when the steel industry collapsed However, through strategic reinvention, Pittsburgh has emerged as a leader in technology, healthcare, and education. The transformation began with honest acknowledgement that the steel industry would never return, and that the city needed to build a completely new economic foundation. Rather than trying to recreate the past, community leaders embraced change and invested heavily in education, research, and technology development. The presence of world-class universities, including Carnegie Mellon and the University of Pittsburgh, provided the foundation for reinvention. These institutions became anchors for technology development, attracting companies like Google, Uber, and numerous startups to establish operations in the city. The universities also provided a steady supply of educated workers and research capabilities. Pittsburgh's government and business leaders made strategic investments in infrastructure, particularly fiber optic networks and modern transportation systems that support a knowledge-based economy. The city also invested in quality-of-life amenities, including cultural attractions, recreational facilities, and urban design improvements that appeal to young professionals. Healthcare and life sciences have become major economic drivers, with institutions like UPMC, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, providing employment for thousands of residents while conducting cutting-edge research. The healthcare sector provides stable employment and attracts additional businesses and residents. Saginaw, Michigan. Auto parts to departed population. Located in Michigan's Thumb region, Saginaw was once a thriving industrial city built around automotive manufacturing and lumber processing. The city has experienced one of the most dramatic population declines in the Midwest, falling from over 98,000 residents in 1960 to fewer than 44,000 today, losing more than half its population as industries collapsed and residents fled for opportunities elsewhere. Saginaw's economic foundation crumbled when General Motors closed its major manufacturing facilities in the 1980s and 1990s, eliminating thousands of jobs that had supported middle-class families for generations. The closure of GM's Saginaw steering gear division alone eliminated over 10,000 jobs, devastating the local economy and triggering a population exodus that continues today. The automotive supply chain that once sustained Saginaw disappeared along with GM's operation. Dozens of supplier companies closed or relocated, creating a domino effect that eliminated additional thousands of jobs throughout the region. The city lost not just manufacturing employment, but also the skilled trades and technical expertise that had made it a regional economic center. Housing market conditions in Saginaw show complete collapse in many neighborhoods. Properties sell for under $5,000 or are simply abandoned, with entire areas reverting to vacant land. The combination of limited economic opportunities and safety concerns keeps housing demand minimal throughout most of the city. Municipal services in Saginaw operate with budget constraints that severely limit effectiveness. The city has eliminated positions, reduced service levels, and deferred maintenance on infrastructure and public facilities. Basic services like street repair, park maintenance, and code enforcement operate with minimal resources. The demographic composition of Saginaw's remaining population makes recovery extremely unlikely. The city has lost most of its middle-class and working-age population, leaving behind residents who are disproportionately poor and elderly. Without an economic foundation to attract new residents or retain existing ones, Saginaw faces continued decline toward functional abandonment. Meridian, Mississippi, railroad junction's final stop. Located in east-central Mississippi, Meridian was once a major railroad hub and industrial center that served as a transportation nexus for the southeastern United States. The city's population has declined from over 45,000 in 1970 to fewer than 37,000 today, with accelerating decline as railroad importance diminished and manufacturing jobs disappeared. Meridian's economic foundation was built on its strategic location as a railroad junction, where multiple rail lines intersected. The city served as a major repair facility for locomotives and rail cars while supporting industries that depended on rail transportation for raw materials and finished goods. This transportation advantage sustained the city through most of the 20th century. The decline began as trucking replaced rail transportation for most freight movement, reducing the importance of Meridian's railroad facility. Deregulation of the railroad industry led to consolidation and closure of repair facilities, eliminating thousands of jobs that had provided stable middle-class employment for generations of residents. Housing conditions in Meridian show the effects of economic decline and population loss. Many neighborhoods have vacant and abandoned properties that create safety hazards, and reduce property values. Limited economic opportunities keep housing demand low and property values depressed throughout much of the city. Municipal services in Meridian operate with budget constraints that limit their effectiveness. The city has reduced staff positions and cut programs while struggling to maintain infrastructure and basic service. The tax base continues to shrink as businesses close and residents leave for opportunities elsewhere. Healthcare access in Meridian faces challenges as medical facilities reduce services or close entirely. The city has lost hospital services and specialized medical care, forcing residents to travel to larger cities for healthcare needs. This is particularly problematic for the aging population that makes up an increasing share of residents. Grand Rapids, Michigan, Furniture City's design renaissance. Grand Rapids, Michigan demonstrates how mid-sized cities can successfully reinvent themselves by building on existing strengths while embracing new opportunities. Once known primarily for furniture manufacturing, Grand Rapids has diversified its economy and become a regional center for healthcare, education, and advanced manufacturing. The city's transformation began with recognition that traditional furniture manufacturing could not provide the economic foundation for future growth. Rather than abandoning manufacturing entirely, Grand Rapids evolved toward higher value production, including office furniture, medical devices, and specialized industrial equipment. Community leadership in Grand Rapids has been exceptional, with business leaders, philanthropists, and government officials working together on long-term strategic planning. Major local foundations have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in economic development, education, and quality of life improvements. Sustainable development practices have been incorporated throughout Grand Rapids' renewal effort. The city has emphasized environmental responsibility, energy efficiency, and sustainable transportation options that appeal to environmentally conscious residents and businesses. The demographic trends in Grand Rapids are positive, with the city attracting young professionals and families while retaining longtime residents. The city has managed to grow while maintaining affordable housing and a high quality of life that appeals to residents across income levels. The contrast between America's dying cities and its success stories reveals fundamental truths about urban sustainability in the 21st century. The 25 cities we've examined that likely won't survive to 2030 share common characteristics: economic dependence on declining industry, inability to adapt to changing circumstances, fiscal mismanagement, demographic hollowing out, and infrastructure collapse that creates self-reinforcing cycles of decline. Yet the success of Pittsburgh and Grand Rapids proves that urban renewal is possible, even for cities that seemed doomed to failure. Both cities succeeded by honestly confronting their challenges, abandoning failed strategies, and building new economic foundations suited to modern reality. They invested in education, embraced technology, diversified their economies, and created quality-of-life amenities that attract and retain residents. The lessons from successful urban transformation are clear, but difficult to implement. Cities must be willing to abandon industries and approaches that no longer work, even when these represent their historical identity. They must invest in education and infrastructure that support modern economic activity. They must create governance structures capable of long-term strategic planning rather than short-term crisis management. The political implications of urban decline affect democratic representation and social cohesion. As cities lose population, rural and suburban areas gain political influence, potentially creating policies that further disadvantage urban areas. The geographic concentration of poverty and social problems in failing cities can create resentment and division that undermine national unity. Yet American cities have shown remarkable resilience throughout history. Many communities that seemed doomed have found ways to reinvent themselves and build new futures. The key lies in leadership that can envision alternatives to the status quo and mobilize resources for transformation rather than mere survival. As we approach 2030, the fate of America's struggling cities hangs in the balance. Some will find ways to adapt and thrive. Others will manage controlled shrinkage while maintaining livability for remaining residents. And many will simply fade away as their last residents seek opportunities elsewhere. Understanding these dynamics is crucial for anyone who cares about urban America and the millions of people whose lives depend on whether their communities can survive and prosper in a rapidly changing world. The story of America's urban future is still being written. The cities that will survive are those that can learn from both failures and successes, embrace change rather than resist it, and build the economic foundations and quality of life that attract and retain residents in the modern economy. For the 25 cities we've profiled, time is running out. But the examples of Pittsburgh and Grand Rapids prove that even the most challenging circumstances can be overcome with vision, commitment, and strategic action.